Loud. All right, we record so that people who can't come can still enjoy this and view it later. And we do have a YouTube channel this goes on to, so that's fun. I'm going to hand this over to Nicole. And I don't know if you can get a better view, but if that's good enough. Okay. Am I good? Mm-hmm. All right, so welcome everyone again to our Healthy Holiday Cooking Demo for this 2021. This is our, for the Wellness and Diabetes Program, our second virtual cooking demo. So we're super excited. Sorry, there's people getting their lunches. Come on in, it's okay, no problem. Bear with us. We're still working out the kinks in technology, but we're so excited that we can get people from the other coast even on board for some of this stuff. So thank you for joining. My name's Alyssa Fine. I am the Wellness and Diabetes Program Coordinator for the Cowlitz Tribe. I'm a registered nurse and certified diabetes care and education specialist. So I work here in the clinic, but I also run programs like this. This is really fun. And behind the camera, we have Nicole Galloway, who's our new health education assistant. So she's going to be here too. A couple just housekeeping notes before we get started. Because we're filming from a phone, it's really hard for us to monitor the chat. So if we ask for input or if you have specific questions, it's probably best to just speak up. But if you're not talking, maybe mute yourself so we don't have a whole lot of background noise. Don't hesitate to speak up if you can't hear me or if you can't see anything properly either. But I'll also be asking you all some questions. I like to hear from you. So don't hesitate to speak up. And also, you've heard this a couple times, but put your email address in the chat to sign in. We'll be sending you a post-class survey to complete so we get some good feedback, and then you'll get, in return for that, a little goodie bag with some cooking tools in it, so you can do some cooking at home with some of these tools. So I think that's what we got for today. So we're going to jump right in. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? Yeah. Okay, so y'all should have gotten the recipes to follow along, but you can either be cooking with me or you can be just watching and learning and doing this later. So we did do some stuff before we started today just to save some time. So you'll see in here we have our, and I got to turn it up a little, our potatoes already boiling. This is for our cauliflower mashed potatoes dish. And just before I jump to the Brussels sprout dish, which is where we're going to start, I'm going to add in the cauliflower. The cauliflower takes a little less time to cook than the potatoes, so we're adding it in a bit later. But you can cook them all at once. You can't really overcook this because you're going to mash it all up anyway. So it's not like we have to worry about texture. So I've already removed the leaves from my head of cauliflower, and we don't have to make this super small. I am going to cut out the core a little bit here, and from last time, you guys might remember, and try to take off some of these leaves that we don't need. But we don't need to make this really, really small. We just need to get the pieces small enough that we can put them under our water here. So I'm gonna put them in once I get them done. And in fact, making them too small might make them hard to get out of the water later. So keeping them bigger is probably better. We got a pretty small head here. Yours might be bigger. That's okay. You guys might remember if you came to my last one, I'm not a big fan of measuring, and I'm a big fan of being very, retired officers, you know, very general with following recipes. So those are in there. We're going to boil this now and kind of step away from it to our next recipe. Any questions about the cauliflower? Death is one reason why. All right, and if you're not talking, again, a reminder to maybe mute. There might be some background noise I hear, so if you're able to mute, that would be awesome. I don't want to make everyone mute because I want you to be able to ask questions if you want to. So we're going to work on the maple roasted Brussels sprouts with toasted hazelnuts recipe next. And this is a great recipe because how many of you like Brussels sprouts? Yay, nay? Anyone have any strong feelings they want to share about Brussels sprouts?
I used to despise them until I figured out that you could steam them, and then I learned I could put them in the oven, and now they're friends. We get along.
Okay, so I love that. So maybe if you have if you despise a certain vegetable, it's not because you really hate it. Maybe it's just because it was being prepared in a way that wasn't so great, right? And I'm hoping that this is what this recipe will do for you today. Anyone else comments about Brussels sprouts?
Yeah, they're really good baked. It gives them a completely different flavor than it does when you steam or boil them. So
Yeah.
that I had learned that in the past. They have a completely different flavor if you bake them. So.
Right. And I think that's awesome. And that's what we're going to do today, because I honestly, this is my favorite way to cook Brussels sprouts. And this recipe is a little bit of a fancier version of a basic roasted Brussels sprouts recipe, but you could take out the nuts, take out the maple syrup, and just do the olive oil, salt, and pepper and still have a really great side dish. But because we're talking holidays today, I thought we'd dress it up just a little. So that's great. I'm glad you guys discovered roasting Brussels sprouts. I did too. And we're going to add the hazelnuts to today's recipe. And we've already roasted these. Roasting chopped hazelnuts, super easy. You can actually do it on the same pan that you are going to cook the Brussels sprouts in. You can preheat the oven, throw it on that parchment paper, bake it for about 10 minutes or so. You're going to smell it when it's ready. That's how I know when roasted nuts are ready. You're going to actually smell that being done. You don't want to overdo it, because I'm sure you all have burnt nuts before. No good, right? That just like the bitter flavor. So you'd rather undercook it a little than overcook it, but just look, pay attention to that smell and look for that golden color. Hazelnuts are actually, go ahead.
What temperature would you put them in the oven at?
I think I did it at 350 today, but you could vary. Like this recipe's at 375. That would be fine. If you're going to already preheat for that, just set it at that and do it there. Yeah, it just might take a little less.
I had a
time.
question.
The chats are popping up.
What?
How
Just
long do you
comments.
roast them for?
About 10 minutes or so, and then I would really check them and pay attention and make sure they're not going to overcook and burn.
Thank
But I'd start
you.
with about 10 minutes. Okay, any other questions about that? Yeah. All right, and hazelnuts are great because they're a traditional food item. And they're especially good. They were used a lot like over the winter time as a good source of fat and protein, with healthy fats and protein being in there. The hard part about hazelnuts is when you gather them is the husks are really hard and hard to remove. So there's a number of ways you can do that. And I have to refer to my notes because I don't know off the top of my head, but you can actually place the hazelnuts in a gunny sack and the husks will rot off. Or you can use thick gloves. And traditionally they were actually buried in damp ground, and then they would rot away the husks over a couple weeks and be ready. They would be stored underground also traditionally. So that way during the harshest months, they could be a good food source. Besides stuff like this, hazelnuts are great. You can actually ground them up, chop them up and use them as part of like a crust that you can make. You could add them to yogurts or trail mixes, those types of things. So they're a great nut to add in during this time of year. So those are our hazelnuts. They're ready to go. So now we have to prepare our Brussels sprouts. And I'm wondering how many people know what Brussels sprouts look like growing out of the ground? Does this look familiar to anyone?
Yeah, I actually grew some this year and I learned that. So
Yeah. Funny, right? And like, this is only part of the plant. This is like the stalk growing up, but there's all parts of it. So if you don't know what it looks like, I'd say definitely go and Google it, look for some images of a Brussels sprout plant. I've already removed some of them, but you can kind of see how it looks up here when it's not removed yet. So pretty cool looking plant. So when we prepare these, we've already washed these. It's a pretty easy preparation. You're just going to cut off the end and then cut them in half. And it's these halves that you're going to use, and you can just throw them right in the bowl. And we're just going to repeat that. And so while we do this, does anyone know what some of the health benefits of Brussels sprouts are? Why we would want you to eat these? Why are they part of the diabetes program's cooking demo?
Well, I'm sure they have a lot of fiber. That's for sure.
Lots of fiber. Very true. And why do we like fiber? And you guys have all heard this from me before, I'm sure, but what's so good about fiber?
Helps our digestion.
Yep, that's one big one. What else?
Help regulates blood glucose.
Yep, good for blood glucose. Yep, keeps it more steady and even. Any other thoughts on fiber?
Is it high in vitamin C?
So Brussels sprouts are high in vitamin C. Yep, that's true about Brussels sprouts. And the other benefits of fiber are things like it actually can prevent cancer and things like that too. So I always like to and it helps moderate cholesterol levels. So getting a lot of fiber in our diet is super important. So eating all these non-starchy veggies like our Brussels sprouts, especially in the season where we're maybe eating some really processed and high fat and high sugar foods, is really important. And then, yeah, like we said, lots of vitamin C and also high in vitamin K too. So, and folic acid and things like that. Low carb, low calorie, just a great vegetable, like a lot of these non-starchy vegetables that we have.
That's awesome. I never knew they were anti-cancerous.
Yeah, fiber in general is. So
Yeah, I didn't know
yeah.
that. That's really cool. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. A good way to get healthy fiber that helps our cholesterol levels is, if we don't get enough veggies, is Metamucil as in a supplement. But honestly, a colorful plate full of veggies is your best way, because we digest things and incorporate things and use things better when it's part of like real food and a real meal. So finding ways that you enjoy these vegetables is going to be so important. And so if you've only had boiled Brussels sprouts, you're in for a treat if you make this. And then hopefully you have a place to compost or throw away these Brussels sprout waste in a good way. That can be challenging in small spaces, but something to think about is, what do you do with this waste? Hopefully we use it as best we can. And you can make as many of these or as few of these as you want, right? Like, you don't have to do 1.5 pounds. If you're just by yourself and cooking for one, scale it back. There's nothing in this recipe that can't be scaled back. And if you like more nuts or less nuts, do that accordingly. And again, if you don't want that maple syrup in there, take it out. But let me tell you, I tried this recipe for the first time a few weeks ago, and I like that maple syrup, and I'm not usually a sweet tooth. So I would say for a holiday recipe, that makes it that special something. So give it a go if you haven't before.
How long do the Brussels sprouts stay fresh, like in your refrigerator, before you were like to cook them?
That's a great question. I've had good experience with them lasting a very long time, but does anyone have any insights to that might have a little more detail and specificity? No?
Huh?
Sorry, did someone say answer that or no? No? Okay, I'd say, I mean, a while. And I know that doesn't answer your question, but I would have to Google it. I could try to look after
We
class.
just watched it on the bed now? I guess, yeah. Well, go ahead. I'm gonna try and get something else to eat. I'm hungry. Still.
Make sure if you're not asking a question or answering, you try to mute yourself. You'll notice with some of these, if they're really large, I might be quartering them. So if you have Brussels sprouts of different sizes, and this is true if you're roasting anything at all, you want to try to make it as uniform size as possible so it's cooking in the same speed. So that's what I'm trying to do here too. Although ours are very similar size, kind of. We got a few smaller ones, but generally they've been pretty similar.
Ali.
All right, so we're done chopping these. I put them all in a bowl ready to mix with the olive oil and salt and pepper. The directions call for about a 1/4 cup of olive oil. I think that's could be a little bit much, but what I tend to do with this kind of thing is just kind of put it in there and then mix it up and see that most of them are coated, because that's what you're really after, is kind of making sure they're pretty well coated with the oil. And then same thing with the salt and pepper. You don't need to use either of these things. If you're watching your salt intake and you don't want to do any added salt, I think that's totally fine. If you want a little, that's good too. And I like a lot of pepper, but you don't have to use a lot. That's up to you too.
Is there a certain type of olive oil you would recommend? Because I notice when I go in the store to make my own choices, there's so many different types of olive oil.
Yeah, I normally recommend extra virgin. In terms of the
Okay.
brand, I don't think it matters a whole lot. I mean, you might have a specific one that you enjoy the flavor for, but in
Okay.
terms of like utility and health, it shouldn't matter that much.
Okay.
And so then
Thank
I'm
you.
just gonna, yeah, you're welcome. I'm gonna pour these on here. Oops. And the most important thing when roasting vegetables is trying to spread them out so they have breathing room. You'll notice that some of the leaves are coming off. Don't worry about that. I really like how those leaves will taste when they become a little brown and crispy. They're almost like little Brussels sprout chips. So you can take them off, but I wouldn't worry about it. I would just try to spread these out as best you can. And once they look as good as they're gonna get, we're gonna put these, put them in the oven, I think. And I'm just gonna make sure I didn't forget anything because I tend to, again, just kind of cook and not really care, but I think it looks good. So I'm gonna go stick this in the oven and then I'll be right back and we'll work on the cauliflower and the potatoes.
Is the oven at 350 or 375?
375, yeah. So it's gonna bake 375. You might find with your oven, it needs a little more, a little less, just experiment with that. That's totally fine. I'm also checking the clock right now. We want to check it in about 15 minutes. So at 12:35, according to the clock on the wall, which I know is not totally right by the actual time, that's when I'm gonna go and remember. You can set a timer. That's probably the more sure way of making sure you're on top of things, but we'll try to remember. All right.
Alyssa, on
Yes.
the, how long the Brussels, I can't talk today, Brussels sprouts will keep in the fridge. I had a bag of them that I bought at Costco over a week ago, and I used half of them and put the bag back in. And I just checked the bag and they're still good.
Yeah.
So. and it's been
I
over
think it's a
week.
long time. I think it's like
Thank
cabbage,
you.
you know,
I think it
one
is
of those
too.
veggies that stores really well. So yeah, I think it's a great one to buy, like, and I
Yes.
wonder how long it'll last on the stock. I'm not quite sure, but we'll see.
Me
Thank you.
either. I used to buy them on the stock in the summertime, but we ate them up too soon to know how long they would keep. But I know it said to keep them on the stock when you buy them that
Mhm.
way, and they'll last longer.
That makes sense. So, okay, that's a great tip. And I honestly think we got a better deal buying it on the stock than we did loose.
Mhm.
But I didn't do the math totally as well as I should have. But that's something to also keep in mind. If they're gonna last longer, it's probably worth spending a little extra money to keep them healthy and going longer. All right, so now we are back to our cauliflower and mashed potato recipe. So can anyone tell me why we might be mixing why wouldn't we just make mashed potatoes? That's the traditional recipe, right? What's wrong with me? What am I doing? Any
I just
ideas?
know you can hide cauliflower in a lot of different things, actually, even mac and cheese. It's a good nutritional booster.
Yeah, so you're kind of, it's a great way to sneak in some veggies. So if you know a kiddo who might not want to eat some, or even an adult, it's a great way to sneak in a lot of veggies. Cauliflower is a pretty neutral flavor, so it can bulk something up without changing that flavor very much. So you'll find with this recipe, it's going to take on the flavor of the potatoes and the garlic and the rosemary. Why else might it be important to add in some cauliflower to this recipe?
When I was at the grocery store and I was looking at stuff, they have bags of cauliflower now that are really tiny, where they substitute it for rice or other things that you're baking.
Yeah, you'll see cauliflower rice, exactly. So for some people, like maybe people who have diabetes, or maybe people who are watching the caloric intake, substituting cauliflower for starchy foods like rice or potatoes can bring down that carb content a lot and make it a healthier dish. So that's what we're doing here really, is we're we're basically creating a substitute for mashed potatoes, but we're sneaking in some veggies to lower the carb content and add all that extra benefit of having a vegetable, a non-starchy vegetable in there. This recipe is also vegan. I took that out of the title not to scare people, but if it's, you're gonna see there's no dairy in it, and oftentimes we have a lot of cream and dairy with mashed potatoes. One of the reasons I like to do it without is to decrease the unhealthy saturated fats. But the other reason is because a lot of the native population actually has lactose intolerance. So this is a good recipe if you are lactose intolerant to avoid the milk. So as you can see, I just checked the cauliflower. You're just wanting it to be fork, what we call fork tender, meaning if you stick that fork in there, it goes in easily. And you can see it's even breaking apart. And I'm just taking it, and I could probably use a better utensil for this, but you know, I'm selecting for punishment, and I'm taking it from the water to our food processor. Having a food processor for this recipe makes it way easier, but you could probably also get away with something like a bread blender or an immersion blender too. But I do love my food processor. It's a great tool for a number of things. So we're just getting all that cauliflower out. We're going to deal with that first. And then our potatoes are done too, and we're going to do those last. It's important not to dump out all your water. And the trick we're going to use, we'll talk about it later, but the water can actually be used to make the potatoes fluffier and stuff. So we don't want to use a colander and dump all that water out right now. So we're just going to keep it there for now. So what's going to go in with the cauliflower is our garlic that we roasted ahead of time. You can roast your whole head of garlic, but if you want to save time, make it easier, we just peeled the garlic, put some olive oil on it, and put it in the oven for about 15 minutes at 350. And it came out gorgeous and beautiful. If you do it with raw garlic, it's going to give you a really strong garlicky flavor. This is going to give you a nice sweet garlicky flavor. So definitely worth the effort of. And I'll tell you, I think we had 3 or 4 people walk into the room while we were roasting this and said, "What are you making?" And we're like, "All we've done so far is roast the garlic." So you'll impress people too. So we're gonna put that in there, and then we're gonna add our minced rosemary. Again, not a big fan of, like, with herbs especially, measuring. So all I'm gonna do, clear space on here, I'm gonna remove some of those rosemary leaves, which smells delicious, by the way, right now. And we're gonna mince that up. And again, we don't have to be crazy because we're gonna put it in a food processor, but we're gonna mince it up, and you don't need Brussels sprouts in there. And I just like piling it up and moving. And you'll notice my chopping technique, and I'm not saying that I am a pro chef chopper, but you'll notice I keep my point of my blade down and just move across it and rock. Decreases the risk of me cutting my finger off, which is always good. And once it's kind of minced up, we're gonna move it into here. Okay, and then it says 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and we will just measure that so you can kind of see what that looks like. It's good to measure your oil if you're watching caloric intake, just because whether an oil is healthy for you, like olive oil, or maybe less healthy, like butter, they still have the same number of calories per gram, basically. So we want to make sure we're not going too crazy overboard. So we're going to add 2 into here. And then it says, what else do we need to put in there? Some salt and pepper too. Again, no real amounts. We'll just. And you'll notice I do the freshly ground pepper. I do think that makes a difference. There's some stuff that really doesn't, but I do. So if something you can get is a grinder like that, I would recommend you doing that. The salt, not as much of a difference, but the pepper definitely. All right, so getting ready for some big noise. We're gonna puree this until it's pretty smooth. So I'm gonna turn this on.
Are you interested in anything?
You want to watch it?
So I'm told you. Go ahead.
gonna check it. It might not be quite done yet, but I can't really see anymore, so. That looks like it's pretty pureed. So you can see what that looks like. You can see the rosemary in there. Maybe a few larger pieces of garlic, which is again why we roast them. So this is gonna be our seasoned cauliflower mixture. And it's gonna be kind of what she says is over seasoned because we're gonna kind of dilute it with the potatoes later. Any questions so far with this recipe? I'll just move this over here for now. Okay. So the next step is to mash up the potatoes. Now, in the recipe, it says to peel the potatoes after you cook them. That's doable, and I'll show you how that looks. And I'm actually going to take out the one we didn't peel. But the problem is it's going to be hot, so I'm not going to touch it for a little while. I'm going to let it cool. So be really careful if you do it this way, not to burn yourself. You're going to let it sit for a second. I probably should have taken this out before we even did the cauliflower. But the other ones we peeled ahead of time. So those are going to go right into the bowl where we can mash them. And again, reserving the starchy potato water to add later if we need to. We might not need it, but we might. And again, you're just looking for these to be fork tender. If you're short on time, cut up the potatoes smaller, they'll cook quicker, and that'll save you some time too. You can use what she says, a food mill, a ricer, or just a really simple potato masher. You could probably also put them into the food processor, honestly, but this is pretty darn easy. You can tell I'm not really struggling. They're falling right apart for me. I'm gonna weigh in and say I'm glad we peeled those in advance. I'm not quite sure what you like, but you can try both ways and decide what's best. And you can mash that up as much as you want. We'll try to move over here. This is how it looks when you peel the potato once it's cooked. You can just literally remove that skin. So whether it's easier for you to do that before or after, and some people even keep the peel on when they mash. It doesn't get quite as smooth, but you can absolutely do it. It's not going to hurt you.
Are there any benefits from leaving the peel on? Because I know I tend to like the peel on myself.
Yeah, I think what they generally say, and I'd have to check this and verify it, is that there might be more fiber and stuff and some nutrition in the peel.
Okay.
So there might be a benefit of it, yeah.
Okay.
But if you like it, just do it. There's definitely no harm.
Yeah.
Right. And you saw I didn't get like every piece of peel off. I'm not really concerned about that. And these are the yellow potatoes. We got this at Wingco. They say Yukon Gold in the recipe, but the yellow ones are basically the same thing. So they'll work too. So I'm just making sure it's well mashed.
Is Yukon Gold less starch or some potatoes less starch?
Are different. And I honestly, I wish I could provide the reason why. I just know that there's certain ones that are better for certain recipes. So
Okay.
depending on what you're making, there might be some that if you're making French fries are way better than if you're making mashed potatoes. So that'd be something to Google. I'd have to look myself. I know that these are really nice for mashed potatoes though. So it might be the
noticed
starchiness. Do you have any more information on that?
I noticed the flavor is different if from the gold in the red or the Russells.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a difference. So find the one that you like and use that. There's no reason not to use one. I just know that for this recipe, the Yukon Gold seems to really nice. And then all we're gonna do now is, well, it says add a little more olive oil, so I guess we should probably do that. We should probably listen to the recipe. I'm very good at that sometimes, again. And you can flavor this however you want. This is a rosemary, salt, garlic, but you could do totally, if you don't like that, that's fine. There's a million flavors you could do with this. So we'll just mix this in now. And if you wanted to do more cauliflower, less potatoes, or look, I mean, this is actually not a bad consistency, just cauliflower itself. If you really wanted to cut down on the carbs or the calories, that would be a way to do it, is just not even mix it, just eat the cauliflower mashed up. So we'll get as much as we can out of here. And then mix it together. This is where we get to decide what kind of consistency we like. The if you like those really creamy, fluffy potatoes, adding a bit of that starchy potato water will make that more happen even more. I find that the cauliflower has a lot more water in it, you know, is a lot looser, so it does that already some. You can see that this has a different consistency than if it was just potatoes. But we can see what would happen if we add a little bit of that from here. We're just gonna grab, and I would just do a little at a time. You don't wanna like over thin it, I guess would be the word. But this is just like as if you were adding in your milk or cream, you know, but again, if you're lactose intolerant, if you're vegan, if you're watching your saturated fat, if you're watching your calories, what a great way to do that. And you can do that with just, even if you're making this fully potatoes. So I'm just gonna add a little more and I think we're gonna be done with this. Any questions about cauliflower mashed potatoes?
They look good.
Oh, yeah, they do, and they taste good, and they smell like garlic, which is awesome. Garlic rosemary. Okay, so we're gonna go check on our Brussels sprouts. The one thing I forgot was so it's been about 15 minutes. So we're gonna go see what they look like, and just kind of stir them. Oops. Oh my God, they're starting to look good. So you can see the little bits are starting to brown up. Those are my favorite. You can see we still got some time for this other. So we're just gonna mix them up, make sure that other sides are up. And just spread it out again. And then when we go and work on our pumpkin pies, we'll be able to come back in and add some maple syrup. All right. So, any questions so far, comments? Anyone following along have any questions?
Oh,
Melissa,
when you did the potatoes, did
Mhm.
you cook them for a while before you added the cauliflower?
Yeah, that's what I did, but you can put them all at once. I mean, the nice thing about this recipe is that you're cooking them all to being pretty soft anyway. So even if you overcook the cauliflower, you're not really going
You're
to have any
mashing it
problems.
anyway.
So,
Okay,
but we did. So you saw that when you came in, like we have the potatoes boiling already. We could have, but I wanted to show cutting the cauliflower and adding it. But if you wanted to just plop them all in there at once, no problem.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was gonna say, since you're roasting the Brussels sprouts, you know, if each individual, you can get some onions and put it with the Brussels sprouts and
Yes.
you know, have a nice little caramelized onions too for a little flavor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could throw in onions, you could throw in any other veggies if you wanted to as well. But I think that would be great. The onions sound like a
I
great
use the
addition.
little potatoes with them sometimes, cut them in half.
Yeah, I don't know if you all have done like total sheet pan recipes too, but they've got recipes out there where you can have your whole
Carrots.
meal roasted together. You can even put some chicken or some fish on there with the veggies. Sometimes you have to add stuff at different times so you don't overcook one thing or the other. But you could basically make a whole meal in the oven on a sheet pan, like we're doing with the Brussels sprouts, and have it come out and have one dish to clean, which is awesome.
Yes.
So yeah, you could add your starch, could be your potato. You could have your veggie as the Brussels sprout, and then you can have a healthy protein on there too. So there's a lot of good options, and you can cook almost any vegetable like we're doing this now. You know, broccoli, cauliflower, potatoes, onions, Brussels sprouts, anything. Just throw it on there and roast them, and they often taste very delicious. Carrots and parsnips is one of my favorites for the holidays too. I was debating that recipe, but if you look for a roasted carrots and parsnips recipe, it's really nice. Any other questions about the two that we've kind of worked on?
Yeah.
All right, so dessert, who's everyone's favorite, right? And I'll admit, we've had a little bit of difficulty with this one because we went shopping. They didn't have everything we needed, so we got creative. So you have to bear along with us. But I love this recipe for this time of year because oftentimes the biggest struggle is enjoying our favorite desserts and holiday foods, but in the right portion. And this pre-portions it out for you, and it makes it an easy, quick treat that's fairly low carb, fairly low calorie, and something we can enjoy, get that taste of, you know, the fall and the pumpkin and the, you know, the holidays, but without going overboard. So this is great. It's a great recipe to take with you to the parties or to things at work when you want to share little things, especially now when maybe with COVID, we don't want everyone's hands in a dish. This is a great one to grab and go. So
Yeah, I went to the diabetes food hub and looked at this recipe, and on their page, they give you all the information, calories and everything in one serving. So that makes it really nice too.
yeah, I love Diabetes Food Hub. So if you're not familiar with that, even if you don't have diabetes, it's a great source for healthy recipes. So and they have all the nutrition information on there, like she said. Awesome. Yes. So it's really nice. So we didn't include that, but you can absolutely go to the website and just look it up, and it's there, and they'll have other ideas for good holiday recipes too. So we could not find the mini phyllo dough or phyllo shells that we normally make. Last year or 2 years ago, when I think I did this cooking demo, I did find them at Winco, so I know they've carried them. I don't know why this year I wasn't able to find them. So we had a couple other ideas. The one that actually worked out for us was these little, like, do you remember what they were called? They're like, I don't know. We had to bake them first and then turn them into little shells. These are going to be slightly more caloric and slightly, you know, bigger than what the normal ones are, but I think they'll be an okay substitute. The other idea we had, but we didn't have time to thaw the actual phyllo dough, is to make our own mini shells using like a mini muffin tin and putting them in there and getting them ready to bake. So that would be another option to try if you can't find those mini shells. I had other ideas too. It was just too late to try, like making a little mini graham cracker crust on your own or something like that. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas they would share if you weren't able to find those little individual shells. Any ideas?
I have, what are phyllo shells?
They are, so the phyllo dough is like a very thin, buttery, flaky dough that often comes sold in sheets. This is also phyllo dough. I don't know if you can tell the texture there, but it's like you see it crumbles off and flakes off.
Flaky. Yeah.
It's really flaky, yeah. And so the shells are really nice because they come in like little, they're already made little shells, and you can just fill them up with your topping and bake them. So they're super quick and easy. These other options are not quite as easy, but they're probably totally doable.
You know, they have now, they seem to be making more those little mini shells, like they make them with graham crackers and different things now. So it should be kind of easy to find a replacement.
Right, yeah. And I think you can get totally creative. Like as long as it's a little mini shell, it should work. There's no reason it shouldn't. So we got creative. We tried these. I've never tried these before. We'll see what happens. So you're in with us in an experiment.
So if you use, like, you bought a pie shell and you cut it in, you know, in small circles, would that kind of change your purpose of the
I mean, you could, like, you bake it as a big pie and then cut it up.
No, before you bake it, you cut them in little circles and then put them in the muffin shell. Or
yeah, that's kind of what we were thinking about doing with the phyllo dough that you can buy like as sheets. So yeah, I think that would be a great thing to try. I don't think that defeats the purpose at all. Phyllo dough and pie dough are both not, I mean, I wouldn't say they're healthy. That's not the reason this recipe is a good choice, right? Like they're full of butter and other things. It's the thing about this recipe being a good choice is that small portion, and the stuff that's in it is also made kind of with an eye on nutrition. So I think that would be a fine replacement. So yeah, get creative, see what you could do. Maybe you make your own pie crust and you put it into little muffin tins. Yeah, I wish I had more time to practice and see. Anyway, but we're gonna start. This is a 350-degree recipe, so hopefully we'll have time to put this in, but the Brussels sprouts will also take a little while, so you might not be able to see this finished baking, but I think you'll get the idea of how to make this on your own. So we have the shells side by side. We're gonna use a small mixing bowl. And we are gonna put in all the ingredients for the toppings, and I'm gonna move this, because we cannot do that there. All right, so the first thing is our the egg whites. So I just make, when I do the egg whites, is I use the shell as a way to strain out the egg whites, and hopefully I don't break anything. And I just go from one side to the other. Ooh, and there I go and drop it. So I'm gonna get it out. But I would just go from one side to the other and then toss the egg yolk in there. And I see a little piece. And I'm gonna take that out. Okay. So I'm gonna do that a little more gracefully this time, but you can see even if you don't, it's still salvageable. Okay, so one side, let the yolk, egg white fall to the other a couple of times to get out most of the yolk. And the egg, I mean the white. I keep saying yolk, but I mean white. And then we're gonna add in the pumpkin, and we're gonna do a 1/4 cup of pumpkin puree. Pumpkin puree is just 100% pumpkin. So again, something with a lot of vitamins, a lot of fiber, a lot of really good stuff for us. So we're just gonna measure this out, and
Could you do this with sweet potatoes as well?
yeah, I don't see why not. That's a good idea. You make sweet potato pie, so why not sweet potato pie let's. Okay, we're gonna add maple syrup. Let me get my teaspoons and tablespoons. So we have, we're gonna use 2 teaspoons of maple syrup, so very little of that. Maple syrup is sugar, so we can't forget that, but it also lends a really nice flavor to things like this. So it just has a very nice flavor to it. We're gonna use a teaspoon of brown sugar, and because we're gonna get rid of this when we're done, I'm just gonna put it right in there. And here's where I get a little funky. We're gonna do a 1/2 tablespoon. Oh, we have a 1/2 tablespoon. So if you don't have a 1/2 tablespoon, just kind of guess of our whole wheat flour. Again, whole wheat flour has more fiber and more good stuff for us than regular flour. So whenever you can use it, go for it. And
And
a
you get
very, very small amount, 1/8 of a teaspoon of our baking powder. We don't even have that, so we're just gonna guess. And then we'll do the rest of the stuff after we whisk this together. So I'm just making this as combined as we can. See it starting to come together a little bit. Now we're gonna add our rest of our ingredients. So we're gonna throw in the vanilla, the pumpkin pie spice, and a little bit of salt. So I'm just gonna do just a tad of salt. Our pumpkin pie spice is a 1/4 teaspoon, and our cinnamon is a 1/4 teaspoon. Okay. And then we're gonna do some vanilla. And again, I'm not a big fan of measuring that. So I'm just gonna pour that in. You can absolutely measure. We're gonna keep whisking. And now it's really easy. And if these were smaller, it would take a whole lot less, but because these are bigger, I'm just gonna grab the spoon I used for the pumpkin, and we're gonna fill up these our little pie shells with this filling, which is gonna do a nice job congealing in the oven. But again, this is a lot more, so it's probably gonna actually take longer to bake. We will have enough for all of them. Some of these didn't rise quite as much as others. We're still learning. Oh, and it smells like pumpkin pie. You smell the cinnamon and nutmeg and vanilla. It just smells delicious. I actually like a perfect amount for these. All right. Oh, add a little more to that really tall one. And we'll use it all up. Okay, so we're gonna go check on our Brussels sprouts, make sure they're doing good. I think the next thing, sorry, we're gonna do with that is add in the maple syrup, but let me just look. Yep, we're gonna stir in the maple syrup and we're looking at about 2 tablespoons. But we're just gonna guess a little because my tablespoon is dirty. Normally I always measure that a little, but oh, look, they're cooking even faster. So we're probably not even gonna keep them in as long, but look at what they're looking like. They're just looking gorgeous right now. So we're just gonna spread a little maple syrup over them. Not much, it doesn't take much. Okay, and now we're gonna mix it up. And honestly, we'll probably just keep it in here for another like 5 minutes or so. I don't want burned Brussels sprouts. I just want them to be deliciously golden brown, but I do want that maple syrup to kind of get a chance to cook on there for a second. All right, so while we're waiting for those to finish, until we're putting these in the oven, does anyone have any questions or comments?
Looks good.
Okay. So that's kind of most of
I
the
wish I
technique
can
here.
smell it.
I know, we need to create that technology where we can share the smell. So one thing that goes really nice with these pumpkin pilots is whipped cream. I am not a big fan of Cool Whip and stuff. It's low calorie, but it's also full of chemicals and things I can't pronounce the name of. So what I like to do is make my own whipped cream at home. So I thought I would just show you guys how to do that real quick while we're waiting for things to bake. We might not be able to see the end of the pumpkin pilots, but at least we'll go through whipped cream a little bit. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so the key for whipped cream, let me go grab some stuff from the freezer. And the fridge. Oops. There we go. So you can see I just took out a bowl and mixing sticks from the freezer, right? That's crazy, maybe. And I realized I forgot the sugar, so maybe we can just make it no sugar. We'll see if it works. You can just make that small. So success for mixing, making your own whipped cream, I mean, comes from cold, keeping everything cold until you're ready to use it. So I like to put the mixing sticks and the bowl into the freezer and take it out when I'm ready. And you notice I took the whipping cream out from the fridge too. I did not keep that out like I did other things because I want that to be cold. I'm gonna put it into your dish. If you have some sugar, this is where you'd add it. I might try adding some brown sugar. I have no idea if that'll work, but you know, we're here for experimentation, right? So we'll add a little bit of that. I'm just gonna plug this in. And you're just gonna whip it on high speed.
So your cream, you just use as much as you think you're going to need?
Exactly, yeah. You can make as much or as little as you want. And you can add some vanilla too, if you'd like. That's a nice thing to add, but we'll just whip on high speed. You need it to be really high and fast.
This is heavy cream. We can't see your face.
We could do this longer. I just don't want to forget
Oh,
the, so we would do this longer to get it a little bit. You can see it's already starting to thicken, so we can come back to this, but I just don't want to forget our Brussels sprouts and burn them. So I'm gonna take a quick second break and we'll be right back with that. All right, so those look done to me, so we're gonna take those out. Oh my gosh, do those look delicious or what? So we're gonna turn this to 350 and put our pumpkin pilots in. The key to knowing when those are done is to stick that toothpick in, and you want it to be sticking a little, but not come out completely, but you don't want it to be totally wet and moist. So that's what we're looking for. We won't have time to show you, but we will put this in now. And if you're in Longview and want to swing on by, just let us know. You can taste it. So
Down the hall. I can smell
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, you might be able to smell it too. So we'll do another like 30 seconds on here. It might not be quite enough, but I want to give everyone a chance for questions and stuff at the end. So I'm going to beat this a little longer. You can see it's really starting to form into your whipping cream now. You don't want to overbeat this. It will stop. It will go backwards if you do. So do just as much as you need to get it the thickness you want, and then stop. And then it will store for a while, and you can top your little pilots with it when they're ready. So that's everything we had for today. Any questions or concerns before we close up?
No.
Alyssa, I have a question.
Yeah.
If you use the phyllo or any kind of shell that you have, you would pre-bake that first before you add the pumpkin or not?
Not necessarily. We had to bake the ones we used because they were flat when we got them. I would say actually probably not. When you make it with the mini what are they called? The cups that you can get, you don't pre-bake those. You just fill them up. So I would say you might need to kind of follow directions. You might need to pre-bake a little bit if it needs some form to it before you add the filling. But I would look at what the box says and kind of play with it. Again, this was something we were unexpectedly having to confront. So I haven't done a lot of experimentation with alternatives. I'm just trying to guess what would work.
Are they in the freezer section? Maybe?
Yes.
Oh,
they're
okay.
in the freezer section.
Thank
Yep. Mm-hmm. Anything else? That's a good question.
I liked everything was so healthy, and yet you can go to your grocery store and buy everything there and just keep building up on that.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. And you don't have to sacrifice taste. Again, I'm a big fan of saying we have like sometimes foods and always foods, and there's nothing that's off limits. But if we're gonna, especially when we draw out the holidays, more than just one meal, when we have leftovers and parties and things all the way from now until, January 2nd or beyond, it can become a little much. So adding in some of these healthier versions and recipes can be really helpful for keeping us on track. But still enjoy your favorites. Just make sure, those are sometimes foods, and then there's always foods. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I had a lot of fun showing you these things. I'm going to have a lot of fun tasting them when we're done. If you have not done so already, please put your email address in the chat so we can make sure you get the post survey. That'll come through sometime this afternoon. Fill it out within a week or so. Tell us what you think, and we'll send you a little goodie bag with some of the tools we might have used today or something to make your cooking life a little easier because we love doing that. But thank you all for coming. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, a great Veterans Day, and we'll see you next time we do something like this.
I have a quick question. Do
Sure.
you toss the hazelnuts with maple syrup in the Brussels sprouts? Is that what that was?
I forgot to add the hazelnuts. We tossed the maple syrup. We can toss the Brussels sprouts now that they're out, but the hazelnuts with the Brussels sprouts now that they're out of the oven. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just wondering if that's what the
Yeah,
hazelnuts
I
are for,
forgot
to go
add
with.
those. Thank you for the reminder. But yeah,
Well, I
they
was
just
just-
go in right at the end.
Okay, yeah, I was just making sure. And then you put maple syrup on it too, right?
Yeah, we put the maple
Okay.
syrup and then put it back in the oven for about 5 minutes. I think they
Okay.
recommend 15. I think that's a little much. I would say maybe 5. I've made this now a couple times and I found that both times the full 45 minutes they're recommending might be a little much for your Brussels sprouts, but every oven's a little different. So just look at it and see what it looks like to you.
Yeah. Because I know I burnt mine last time I baked them, so that's why I was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
the outside, and I ended up having to pull off the outside shell of the Brussels sprout, and the inside was still good. So,
Yeah.
but all
Yeah,
right, thank
so,
you.
Yeah, just play it by ear. It might not be that full 45 minutes. It might be more like 30, but I would add the maple syrup and then put it back in the oven for at least 5 minutes to cook that maple syrup a little.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions?
Alyssa, is it possible you have written recipes, right? For those of us that didn't pre-register, can we get
Yeah,
those?
I will. When I get all the posts, when I send out the post survey link, I'll include the recipes.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, you're
Really
welcome.
enjoyed today's class.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
They're also at the bottom of your message you sent to tell us about today's class. At the
Yeah,
very
I think
bottom, there's a little thing to tap for them.
Yeah, I think some people might have joined because they heard about it. And so I will make sure I send them out again to everyone who's
Oh,
actually
okay.
on it. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you again for coming. I had so much fun. And don't hesitate to reach out. Once you get my email, you'll have my email and you'll have my phone number. So any questions or concerns that come up after today, just let me know. Again, this was all recorded, so we're gonna get it on our YouTube. So if there's someone you think who might enjoy it, who wasn't here, they can absolutely go and watch it and hopefully learn from it too. But thanks so much and have a great afternoon, everyone.
You too. Thank you. See you next week.
Yeah, see ya.